do governments or others who have power over people control the behavior of their subjects or citizens? We are going to be looking at several methods used to control that behavior. Coercion is one of the methods used. To coerce means to force, and someone with authority can use a threat in order to force people to demonstrate certain behavior. For example, a teacher who might threaten a student with detention if they don't do their work is coercing the student to do that work. Governments have even more means of authorities and ways to coerce their citizens because they control means of violence in a country and therefore can punish citizens in order to enforce and control certain behavior. Think of the death sentence that some countries use in order to prevent certain behavior. It could be the death sentence as a punishment for violent crime, but there are even countries that enforce the death sentence against citizens who have different opinions. So it can also be a way of controlling the political opposition. In addition to threatening the lives of citizens and subjects, some governments also choose to take a more mild approach and simply threaten their livelihood. This could be, for example, through fines. If you get a fine for running a red light or even jaywalking, then you'll probably think twice about it, certainly if it's a very high fine. In this way, the government hits your bank account in order to control your behavior. The idea being that they control you through the threat, that you don't do the behavior to prevent getting the fine or punishment that they are threatening you with. In order to make good on those threats, though, the person with the power to coerce you needs to know what you are doing. Which brings us to the next method of control, surveillance. Surveillance is used to keep an eye on the subjects and citizens. Big Brother is watching you. George Orwell's famous novel 1984 made that sentence famous way before the show Big Brother, but basically was about watching a population, so much so that people had no privacy whatsoever, and punishing anyone who criticized the state. When we think about punishing people for criticizing the state, we think of a lack of freedom of speech, more common in dictatorships. Of course, surveillance is used by all governments in order to monitor behavior of citizens and subjects in order to see if they are showing any illegal behaviors. So it's not just surveilling those who criticize the states. That would be more specific to a non-democratic regime, but surveillance is used. We see cameras hanging around to make sure that people are not doing anything illegal. So it can be used as preventative, but also in order to catch people who have already done something that is not allowed. And if we look back at the example of school, surveillance is also used during exams to keep an eye on students. Teachers walk back and forth monitoring to make sure that no one is cheating. So surveillance is simply a way of making sure that the behavior that is expected is being followed, and if not, that those with the authority can punish them for that behavior. It's also possible that cooperation takes place between those with power and those with less power in a sort of exchange in order to control what's going on. Corporatism is institutionalized cooperation. So when the government works together with certain groups or institutions in society, and that is a tradition of cooperation. You saw it in Mexico under the PRI, where the Mexican government would work together with different social and market institutions in order to control what was going on in society. You also see it in Western European countries, like in the Netherlands and Germany, where the government talks to large labor organizations and representatives from business organizations to control those social and economic relationships. Clientelism is also a form of cooperation, but it's less institutionalized. It's more one-on-one exchanges for favors between, it could be an individual or maybe one company and the government, where they work together and cooperate, but the control is less widespread and institutionalized and can therefore be more likely to lead to forms of corruption or kleptocracy in very extreme cases. So cooperation can be quite traditionally normalized in a society, but when it's used only to benefit the few, then we see that it becomes more corrupt, kleptocratic, and less fair for the entire society. And finally, a more implicit means of control is when a personality cult is created. A personality cult around a charismatic leader who is held up to be all-powerful and really a symbol of the nation. Saw it Stalin as the ruler of the USSR, and basically the Kim leaders throughout the history of North Korea started as a charismatic leader and has been passed down through the personality cult of the Kims in order to really control the people, that the leader is worshipped to have an almost godlike status in the country. And in a dictatorship, I mean, it's one thing to have a charismatic leader that people really follow and worship. You'll see that in many governments throughout history. But when there are punishments enforced against those who criticize the leader, we really speak of a personality cult, because it's not just charismatic legitimacy, but there's a cult-like structure around that personality that is used to control the behavior of the citizens, much more so used in dictatorships than in democracies. So while coercion is used in all forms of government and schools, surveillance is used throughout society in order to control behavior. Even parents are using them with nanny cams and checking their children's telephones. Cooperation can be seen as a quid pro quo of favors, and when institutionalized, a form of corporatism that really is throughout the entire society to control how social structures develop. But finally, that personality cult is one that we really see in dictatorships under certain leaders in order to control behavior. In conclusion, if you are studying societies or human behavior in general and wondering how it is that governments or others with the proper authority are able to control humans with free will to show certain behavior, look to see if you can find examples of these methods, coercion, surveillance, cooperation, or even a personality cult, being used in order to steer human behavior and control society in a certain direction. Bye-bye.
Like this video, subscribe for more lessons by Miss Mar.